entreprise de construction de d'ULM à Tallard. Belle entreprise, hein, belle
D'accord.
entreprise. Et du coup, là, je viens de boucler de terminer la table ronde, mais en vision. Un peu en
D'accord.
voiture, un peu ici.
Canal italien, donc Selena, c'est bon, je t'ai mis en cabine. J'espère que c'est le bon ordinateur que j'ai mis en cabine. Attends, hop. Elle est où Selena? Hop là. C'est Selena. Selena, Pietra, tout le monde. Merci, mon micro ne marche pas. Ça y est, c'est bon. Ça devrait être bon, Selena. Là, maintenant, tu devrais pouvoir allumer ton micro sur le canal italien. C'est bon? Donc, je t'ai mis le Selena. Voilà, je t'ai pas mis. Tu peux te renommer ou pas en INT? Ou tu veux que je te renomme? Pas de souci, pas de souci. Oh putain, j'ai torticolis, moi. C'est bon pour moi. Impeccable.
Bien, alors on va commencer cette conférence de presse. Je crois que les journalistes sont en ligne, plus monsieur qui est donc en présentiel. Ce que je vous propose, c'est qu'on ait un petit mot de présentation peut-être de la journée. Quel était le thème et l'objectif de cette journée par Pierre Voller, qui donc est le maire des Orres, qui accueillait et organisait l'événement ici. On a également à ses côtés Christiane Barret, qui est la déléguée française à la présidence de la SUERA, donc la stratégie de l'Union européenne pour la région alpine. Monsieur Pancou, qui est vice-président de la région Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes. Et puis en visio, nous avons toujours Chantal Eméhoud, qui est vice-présidente de la région.
We've also got the vice president of the region for the Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur, and I think that we're waiting for someone else.
Bourgogne-Franche-Comté, voilà. Donc vous avez les trois régions françaises qui sont concernées par la SUERA. Pierre, peut-être
voilà,
pour
en
bien
un
préciser
mot,
les
donc
choses.
effectivement, une conférence.
In other words, this was a conference on the future of mountains over 2 days. Today was the first day of the conference. We've closed the program and we've told participants about the Smart Altitude program for energy transition for our resorts. We have 27 resorts within our network. We share information, good practices, etc. We've had roundtables, and the presidents of federations and national associations, such as Jean-Luc Gog, who is the mayor of La Plagne, but Alexandre Moulin, who is the president of SF, and Eric Brecht, president of the French ski schools. We are in touch with all stakeholders, and they've all given their visions and expectations following this complicated time that our resorts have gone through last winter. We've had a roundtable with industrials, big industrials such as Veolia, SFR, Orange, EDF, RTE. They've told us about their actions and what they carry out for the future. We've also had a roundtable with politicians, such as Christiane Barret, who is with us, from the EU strategy for the Alps region. We also have people from all three regions of USALP, the South region, Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes, and Bourgogne-Franche-Comté. The goal being to share with several members of parliament, Marie-Noëlle Battistel and others. We want researchers of INRAE, such as Emmanuel Georges, to tell us what visions they have for our tools for the future to be efficient, to help our ski resorts, our mountain resorts to start this environmental transition, which is an obligation, and we need our touristic models to change in light of climate change. Mrs. Barrett maybe would like to convey a message, something that you talked about today. Yes, this conference was organized under the aegis of USALP, the European Strategy for the Alps region. It was very fitting because this project interests several European countries, and we now have 27 resorts taking part as it's been extended over time. It started with the energy transition, and now, of course, we are reaching a stage where we talk about the whole climate transition rather than just energy transition. And the pandemic also means that we've had to consider other aspects of our future. So the lessons that we've learned from this are that we need to think collectively, and this is what have been done all throughout today, and we will continue to do so. We will try to convene all stakeholders, so elected representatives, economic professionals, associations, NGOs. We've also talked about the launch of the General States of Tourism and Transition on the 23rd and 24th of September. It's organized by Mountain Wilderness and the Associations for Mountains and Transition. So this will be very interesting. There will be 40 workshops in the Alps Valley. And of course, we hope that our European friends of the Alp regions will take part. So we want a collective intelligence and in order to create the mountain of tomorrow. Our young people will be the deciders of tomorrow, and we want them to go even further than we will define ourselves. So we want to work together. We want to take diversity and complementarity of all territories into account, because we've noticed that no valley is perfectly similar to another. They're all very unique. They have a topologic, cultural, social, geographical specificities. 1,500 meters of altitude in the Vosges is not the same as in the Alps, so there are very specific features that need to be taken into account: collective intelligence, the specificity of territories, and of course, all of the policies and means that need to be implemented. We have observed that we don't need more funds. Of course we do, but it's not the only thing we need. We will soon have our mountain plan. We'll see how much fund will be allocated to this, but it's more about building projects that are adapted to territories and the goals that we set ourselves. I'll let my colleague tell you more about this. The idea is for this environmental, ecological, and social transition to take place. I'll answer the questions if there are any. Do you want to add something? I had not planned on talking about this, but Christian Barré just mentioned it, so I want to add just a few words. When we launched the USALP at the state level and at the level of our 3 regions, we had, of course, ambitions in mind. The USALP has allowed for debate, sharing of ideas at the level of the French territory, but also for all partners, because we all must always bear in mind that when we talk about Team France, we also have other countries accompanying us, and it's thanks to this whole team that we've had debates. We live our territories, and we need to give a part to young people. We've had 2 testimonies for startups earlier, and it's important to bear in mind that there's a citizen dimension and participation dimension in our territories. Since February 2020, we have launched this youth help with the French presidency of the group, and we have noticed that we had vague ambitions, but we have now translated them with a very clear goal and ideas. And what we've seen in Métablier a few months ago is that we've entered the concrete phase. And when we now have money funding, we've also defined what we wanted to do for our mountain territories. So I think this is a historical moment because it will allow us to implement all of this and to translate words into deeds. I'm going to give the floor to Madame Lukizi or Emewood. If you have questions here, you can ask them, and the journalists who are remotely connected, you can request the floor via the chat and we will allow you to ask questions. Chantal Emewood, you have the floor. Yes, thank you very much. I would like to thank Pierre Voller for this hard work and he's done with his teams to organize this forum. I've not been available all day either. I've visited several towns because the city have taken part in the funding of the projects that Joël Giraud was following. But I've followed closely what has been said today, even though I was not here at all times. And as Fabrice was saying, we've entered the active phase of the project now for the transition of our resorts for all sectors. But the health crisis has accelerated this transition because we know that mountains are our magical area in which permanent residents want to stay, but we also have tourists who want to visit. On weekends, we have very many visitors in spite of the constraints and the distance. But this requires for us to step up our coordination of public policies. We have tools in place, but what I will remember from today is that we have a shared willingness to provide training so that we can all work together and so that resorts will have the tools to fulfill the needs and demands of tourists that are becoming more and more demanding, and they also have expectations that are unexpected sometimes. Madame Lucchesi, if you'd like to take the floor. Thank you, Pierre Voller, and all the people who have allowed for the organization of today. I think that this event shows that the youth help and the French presidency has overcome crises, and the pandemic was no little crisis. And I think that it's because it has a strong coordination and cooperation that we've been able to overcome this. We are on a territory that is European, and it's partnership, cooperation, and solidarity that will allow us to make headway in spite of climate change, and it will allow us to innovate regardless of the energy transition for the Alps. Are there questions from I have a question in the room, and then Rémi Vialdi. Noé Philippot from the Dauphiné Libéré newspaper. Mountains cannot live without skiing, and in light of the speed of climate change, we will not have as much skiing activities. Does this mean that there will be an unavoidable decrease of touristic activities? And if so, how do we make up for it? So I'll give an answer which is not binary because it would be too easy. I am convinced, and I know I'm not the only one, that when we have a look at the economy of mountains today, skiing still has a very important part to play, and figures are very striking about that. So skiing is a very important part to play in our economy, in our local economy, and without this local economy, there's no local life because it's $8 to $10 billion euros. In terms of revenues, it allows families to settle, and it's a whole valley life that is linked to this. Earlier, I was explaining that what allowed us to overcome this winter without cable cars or ski lifts is because we've had significant support from the state, and this has compensated the loss in revenues. This does not mean that we need to continue to do this without evolving whatsoever, and in spite of the change in our environment. We need to work with Espace Valea, for instance, and our different politicians. There's a wide array of tools from the state, regions, departments. They allow us to offer other activities, but as of now, they do not replace the economy represented by skiing. We cannot tackle only one type of model. And I'll give you two examples of the Savoy region because this is where I come from. When we talk about the Bauge mountain in the Savoy region, we have a rationale that is, of course, taking into account diversification and all year round diversification with the new type of sliding and discovery of our heritage. I've not mentioned cuisine before, but I will now because it's very important. And alongside the other activities that are very interesting. Another example of Savoy, Val Thorens, which is at 2,300 meters of altitude at the bottom of the station. You can well imagine that the two models that I've just mentioned are going to need a completely different logistics. So these two examples in Savoy illustrate that at the region level we have myriad of solutions, and your question was very clear. My answer is not as clear because of course we need to take into account many elements. To complete what I said earlier, we will carry out these changes progressively. There's a diversification, and regardless of the model that you believe in most, you will have to diversify. Also because up until now, we were focusing on winter activities when we now know that we need to think of all season, and it needs to be our new ways of thinking. And I've not said 4 seasons, but all seasons, because 4 seasons does not mean much if we have climate change. So if we want to extend this to other seasons, I think that this can be done everywhere. I think that this holds for the Hautes-Alpes as well, and Pierre Voller will confirm or not. We've seen that there are several areas where we had found that we now have the same amount of nights being booked in the summer and in the winter. So we've launched this approach and we will support it now. So maybe I wanted to give you more detail here compared to what I've said this morning at the roundtable. And I have a vision which is not only based on figures. I want to be very practical. Just to give you an example of what we do here in Ozon, we've doubled our summer revenue in the past 5 years, thanks to the development of biking, for instance. We will have a World Cup next summer, but this only represents 10% of the activities of our resort, which means that 90% take place in the winter. So our strategy is to continue to consolidate the activities that are the economic drivers for us to continue, and we can implement and set up new cable cars rather than ski lifts. With the support of the region, the South region, they're helping us doing this. We also want to develop sports and leisure activities that are complementary to this, and we want to step up their development. We want to attract new publics. We want to practice these new sports on a regular basis so that there are complements. And we want to have an economic model in mind. There are no ski lifts at the moment, so we have clients, but now maybe we have more revenue from rackets. We implement, we now have people can make an appointment and go and visit the mountain any time of year. Good afternoon. I wanted to say that maybe now you have concrete examples to give us regarding the problems of one territory and how we can replicate the solutions to it elsewhere. I'll just take the floor and give you a few examples, but others will then be able to complete what I'm saying. We've mentioned this at the end of last roundtable, concrete examples. So I'm going to talk about the Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes region. We've committed ourselves for mobility. We now have valley lifts, and we are setting up cable cars in the Maurienne Valley as well. And we will complete this. It's already the case in several areas, and we are modernizing the current infrastructure near Brive-les-Bains. This is really deep in the valley near Méribel. And we are restructuring everything between Bourg-Saint-Maurice and Les Orres. Another accomplishment, we're on a territory where we know how important this is, the chenillette hydrogen, so the hydrogen snow groomer, scooters. This is no longer a utopia. We're at the dawn of a new era. We've not had demonstrations yet, and in a few months we will launch this, and we will have an implementation, a very concrete implementation. Last example, in the Arcs, we have something like that as well. Last example that I wanted to mention regarding hydrogen. Maybe transportation, clean transportation is already in place with electric shuttles, autonomous shuttles. It exists in our valleys, but in our resorts as well, in Chamonix and Val Thorens, among others. And we have heavy heavy trucks and buses, and that are also running on hydrogen, and shuttles as well. Just to give you other examples, concrete examples, the implementation within the Smart Altitude program that we've closed today. In the Orres, we have a system to manage energy, and this has allowed to lower consumption by 20% and by 25% the cost, and we've saved 100 ton of CO2, and this system is quite unique, and it is being replicated in several European stations as we speak. Regarding the experience hub that we're going to develop here in Les Orres with the help of the state and the region, we are going to implement an experience hub whose goal will be to try and attract with digital tools, with simulation tools, and we have an innovation hub, and we've already selected an architect, and they're launching the project today. They're going to create links between the equipment makers, the rental shops, the ski schools, the federations, to help and develop our stepping up of skills. We are going to use sensors, drones on the resorts for ski and cycling, but for any athlete, we want them to try out new sports, and we want to help them become better and have better performances, and we want to make them loyal and continue. We want them to continue their sports. Are there any other questions? Has the health crisis changed the economy of mountains? I cannot hear you. Has the health crisis changed the touristic economy of mountains, or does it encourage us to imagine new things aside from skiing? The health crisis has not allowed us to see how to work differently. It's just put a complete stop to any type of activity. To answer your question, try to imagine what happens if all of the state subsidies that have compensated for revenues had not been given. What would have happened? It's an unprecedented disaster, because we would have had gone under. We would have seen all sectors being completely stopped without any kind of anticipation. And here I'm not only talking about ski lifts or piste management and maintenance. I'm talking about all of the restaurants, all of the back office and support activities that we tend to forget. Hairdressers, they're still obtaining subsidies. Automobile garages, everything has stopped overnight. So this crisis has not allowed for us to create a new model or anticipate a new model. It's accelerated the fact that we had started debates, discussions, exchanges as we're having today. It has fed these discussions because we're already there. But we've not said that we needed to stop this model, because a catastrophe might happen. We need to take into account the evolution of our environment but it has an impact on many other activities, and many other parameters come into play. The first sensitive topic is the way in which our natural environment reacts. Water, natural risks, for instance, are two parameters. I could talk about many others, but these two have absolutely nothing to do with whether we are skiing or not. It's not that there's no more water. It's just that the distribution of water evolves with the evolution of our environment. Life in the mountain is critically linked to natural risks, but the evolution of the environment evolves as well. Falls, avalanches, all of this is linked to the changes in climate. So when we talk about the evolution of climate, the question is not whether we will still be skiing in 2030. It's more, if we love the mountains, and that's why we're all here today, we need to think about how to adapt to the evolving environment in which we live. And in light of this, how can we become resilient? This is the buzzword of the moment, and we have to use it. So that's it. We've dropped it. So how can we live in a natural environment that is evolving? How can we ensure that we will still have populations living in the valley in the coming days, in terms of economy, in terms of development and quality of life?
Just a compliment. We can see that all of the different stakeholders have come together. They've actually come together in light of the pandemic, be this different ski instructor schools, be this prefectures, departments, regions, everyone. Everyone has understood that we need to create this environment that is very favorable to work together. Given what we've just heard, the results that we've seen from everything that has been done, it's very important for us to stick together and put into place actions that are efficient, not only for the mountains, but also the mountain tomorrow morning. We have Anne-Cécile who has a question. You have the floor. Anne-Cécile Audra. Yes, good evening. Thank you very much for taking my question. I work for the WEG magazine Bleu Tomate based in Marseille. We are specialists when it comes to transitions for tourism and agriculture. To come back to what has just been said, I want to talk about the place of local populations and the way in which you hope, and I imagine that you do it already, that how you will be inspiring them even more and how you'll be looking at different economic models. You have spoken about participation and ensuring that the youth and local populations are on board. What will change, or what has already changed in your approach to ensure that it's a lot more participatory when building the ski stations of tomorrow? Chantal, would you like to respond? I would love to. It would be a pleasure for me to answer this question. Chantal, we've lost you. No, I'm still here. Okay. No, I'm still here. As I was saying, the question from the journalist is very interesting because we're looking at participatory democracy. When we're looking at participative democracy, it's something that we've seen and that we know relatively well. Why? Because we have the right to universal suffrage, and also because once we have been elected, we work hand in hand with all of our citizens. It is not a dictatorship, it is a democracy. If we think about the stations now, this year we have not only been taken aback by the rapidity and the speed at which the different mechanisms were rolled out in the light of the pandemic. We didn't have time. We didn't have time to discuss. We didn't have time to think about the different mechanisms, but all of the different actors were associated all together, all through the different steps that were taken by our regions, by all of the local MPs within the committee for the mountain regions. We've mentioned this morning. For the Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur, this was something that was taken into consideration as well. The mountain is very important. All of the different decision makers, people talking about the presidents of different institutions and bodies, or the presidents or vice presidents of the departmental councils, economic actors. Everyone was ensuring that all of the decisions were shared and taken together. It was important to put into place mechanisms to save the economy. There was a sense of urgency, there was a sense of emergency as well, because we wanted to be able to support all of the different economic actors who were suffering at the hands of the crisis. Some of them have not even opened. A lot of the shops and commerces weren't able to open during the whole of the pandemic, even though there was some state funding and there was some regional funding, especially if we think about the different mechanisms made available by Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur. But it was important for us to work hand in hand with all of the different economic actors, because we've understood exactly just how much they've suffered and how many of our citizens are still in precarious situations. Some of them are or do have access to job seekers allowance, but some of them quite simply just don't. It was important for us to ensure that we were homing in on a participatory democracy, thus allowing us to implement the different tools. I could go into further detail if you want, but I'll stop here. Thank you very much, Mr. Pankouk. What I wanted to say just very quickly is that for the Alps, we do have a document available. It's a document that we've worked on, and it's called the Chemin du Massif in French. It's only available in French. And I actually would encourage you to read this document, because it defines the way in which we live in these different territories. All of the different populations are listed, how they live, how they go about their daily businesses, and what they need as well. I would encourage you to read this, because it would answer a lot of the questions that you asked. If we now think about the participatory approach, I think that the SUERA under the French presidency was and has been a great lab, especially for youth participation. This is a lot in the Bourgogne-Franche-Comté region, and with its president, that we can see that for the youth, I believe that there was a youth assembly, a creation of a youth assembly. Thank you very much, Christian. There was a youth council, rather, that was created within SUERA, and this allowed all of the different youth living in mountainous areas in Europe to be committed and to be involved. We've learned a lot. We went out to meet them, and we've done this over the course of the past few months. This has also allowed us to go back to our regions, to our territories, and to share different ideas for the future. If I can just complete this, can I jump in here, please? I don't know who's speaking. It's Liliane speaking. Off you go. I just wanted to complete. The first youth council will be created in July of 2021 for a year, which means that we look at youth coming from all different countries: France, Germany, Liechtenstein, Germany, Austria. They can all be part of this. And if possible, they can send an application up until the 16th of May. Because it's very important for us to be able to overcome these different challenges that the region is currently coming up against. This is of huge importance. They're part of the SUERA region. It is virtual, and there are concrete measures that have been taken. Concrete measures that take into consideration the particularities and the specificities of the region. There'll be a youth camp organized in Bourgogne. There was meant to be a youth camp organized in Bourgogne-Franche-Comté last year. We're not sure what the future holds and if this will be possible this year. However, there will be another project organized by Tyrol and the European Commission and supported by the French presidency. There will be a SUERA youth camp with different activities online, and the pitch or project competition that was mentioned earlier will go ahead, this for the 4th time. It will be implemented during this period. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to the journalists. Thank you for participating in this conference, in this press conference. It's been wonderful, and that's all. Thank you very much and good night.